Hello, I wanted to talk about 3D environment workflows, level concept and design, and my pipeline for creating a playable environment from scratch. My name's Glenn, I'm the art and design half of the game Forecast, a unique turn-based tactics game currently in development. The objective of this video is to shed some light on what a typical workflow might look like and why I have personally made certain decisions or have done things in certain ways. I will not be describing how to use the software that I show. I want to show why I'm using it and how I'm structuring my usage. So it's more of a workflow overview and discussion and not really a tutorial. But if you have any questions about any of the stuff I show you in the video, feel free to leave a comment and I'll get back. So let's begin. First off, I want to show you the end result. So this is the level. It's referred to internally as the chest dimension or the portal dimension or a pocket realm. It's a playable level, more arena based, and the focus of this level is to have more kind of smaller scale mayhemish fights. So it's fully playable right now. You can run your guy around, get him to make attacks. I'll just spam some stuff because it's fun. Oh, that's not going to go well, is it? So yeah, as you can see, oh, I just blew myself up, but that's fine. Yeah, I went down the center route this time, but there's other areas you can go down the sides. And yeah, so this is an overview of how I made this level and why I made it the way it did and what decisions I had to make along the way. So to start with, here's a flyover of the level. As you can see, there's the center area, there's a chessboard which is illuminated by this kind of forks god rays I've created using just a mesh and a basic material. There's a central terrain where you can fight across these two planes, and then there's two elevated areas on the sides which are little arenas of themselves, and a team on either side. So the objective for this level was I wanted a clean layout, very clear as to where you can move, and I wanted it to be very predictable so that you could anticipate, well, hey, if this guy over there is in the center area, then he's got, a couple of choices to make, and if I dedicate a couple of units to that, I can cordon him off and get him with an attack. So it's because of the more restricted movement, it makes it easier and more predictable for you to work out where enemies are going to be. Obviously, they'll be doing the same thing, but that's where it gets interesting. From a story point of view, the game is set in Purgatory, and one of the main characters, Gideon Balthazar, is a portal demon who aids the main character, Idolric, in escaping from Purgatory. And the portal demon obviously has a great mastery over portals, and you will frequently find yourselves entering different dimensions and stepping through different portals to take you to different lands, and this is one of the places that Gideon takes you to. I wanted it to be quite fanciful because Gideon, being the demon that he is quite eager to show off splendor and riches and nice looking things, so that's why everything's shiny and marble. References, I decided to go with indoor. I wanted it to be grand, and I wanted it to be nicely framed so that you can kind of see the confines of the arena despite it being in a portal floating in space. So for gathering references, I use something called PureRef. PureRef is pretty nice. So this is PureRef. There's nothing here right now, but you can just grab references and throw them in, and it will store them for you to look around, scroll around, and do with what you will. So I'm just going to quickly grab some of my references that I had stored up for this. So this isn't all of them, but this is just the ones I have saved currently. So you can just drag them in and bang, it populates them all. You can zoom in to the references and see details as you want, scale the little window, move it into a corner. There's very little UI, so it's kind of nice and lightweight, but it keeps the resolution, which is really nice. So yeah, this is the tool I'm using for references, if that helps with my workflow. So these are some of the references I was looking at when coming up with this level. So hopefully you can see how that affected some of my design choices, some of the geometry, and mostly to do with the color schemes and material usage. One of my weaknesses that I'm trying to improve on is that I do not reference enough. I think it's a common flaw that most 3D artists have. Referencing is really vital, really essential, really helpful, and will just generally improve your art. So it's something I'm trying to do more, and this is my some of my first steps towards that. So I'm trying to take more references, look at more things more, and draw inspiration. It helps both with the design, but also it can help you with the story. You'll see some cool element, you think, you know what, that actually makes a lot of sense. So yeah, from the references, I then went on to create some blockouts. This is the very first blockout. You can see it adheres to the initial requirement of I want to have predictable lanes of movement, and I had pillars on the sides so that I could have a nice framing to show you where the confines of the arena was and still have some geometry to play with to sell the theme I wanted. I was fairly happy with this actually. So the design didn't change colossally at its core. Obviously, it became bigger and grew more detail. But the core concept of having two raised platforms on either side and the chess piece central. The initial, very first idea I had was the chess piece was going to be the entire level was the chessboard, but I moved away from that because I thought it would have been a bit too restricting. The second block out, like this. So I gained the wing elevations, which I'm really fond of because something I like with the forecast game project is that nothing is percentage based. So if you hit someone with a projectile or a spell or an explosion, they take damage. We don't do calculations to see if you hit or miss. If you hit someone in the face with an icicle, they have an icicle in their head. So if you're standing on this elevated plane with your unit and you're shooting down, you have all of this to shoot at. If you're shooting up at someone, you don't have as much to hit. He can like cast a spell and then duck away and do other things. So he's has an advantage with terrain as he should do. So I'm quite fond of trying to implement more terrain in this game and future levels. So I really like that aspect. And then we came on to this, which is very nearly the finished block out. There's some more work I did in the sides in future and some of the banisters. Obviously, I changed these chess pieces to be unique and caricatured rather than just being flat chess pieces. But at this point, I was quite happy with the layout. I had floating broken pillars on the sides to show that this is kind of like a strange realm where things are kept in stasis or kept in their current position by magic. And we added these portals on the sides, which show you which teams are starting where. Gideon will be providing you with portals to help you deploy your constructs and magical units that either it controls from afar. Now, the rest of the video will explain how I got from A to Z and some of the decisions that were made along the way and why things were done that way. So we'll jump into Blender, which is the software I use. Here is the base blockout, the very first one I showed you earlier, and you can see it's all one mesh. This was just created quickly, or one object just created quickly and exported and thrown straight into Unreal to see how it laid out, and play tested really quickly to see how it felt. I decided that it was a bit too constricting, there wasn't enough decisions, which is why we moved on to the slightly more open blockout where there were some wing areas for more movement. But anyway, we've gone over all that, so onto the final piece. Once I'm happy with the blockouts, I start dissecting them down into the smaller pieces and breaking it out. So we have the side pieces here, the back piece of the center zone, the chessboard itself, stairs, etc. There's a big piece there which should really be broken out a bit better than that. So that's a note for future. Once I'm happy with that, and this is more kind of like a low poly blockout. It's not like the very first initial rough blockout sketch where I'm just trying to work out what I like. This is more just upgrading the individual blockout into a detailed low poly model that has geometry that I want to have in the game. Once I've done this and I've upgraded it all and I say, you know what, I like this. This looks the way I want it to. It has enough geometry and enough detail that I can sell the aesthetic I'm going for. Then I move on to actually unwrapping the individual parts and exporting it, texturing it with creating the material in Substance Painter, and exporting the textures and sorting it out in UE4, setting it up and making it playable. So from here, the next step is that's a Blender collection of all the parts, and this is all just laid out. So logical duplicate meshes just so I can get an idea for the layout. And then I go over to this area. It's not normally this cluster. This obviously built up over the time of unwrapping every individual piece that's used. The collection is called low poly, but it's actually both. It's low poly and high poly. I tend to use a bit of both. So we'll use this as an example. This is a platform which you see at the top of the scene. So it's this platform right here, this piece. You can see the seams all over it. I'll show you the UV quickly. I do spend a fair bit of time on my UVs. I think it's kind of important to use your space well, to understand your UVs well, and to maximize your usage. This isn't a great unwrap, I confess. There's a lot of dead space. You see the general idea. I want to maximize straight lines, UV space, and allow myself to edit them if I need to, so I can clearly see different parts and give more space to it if I feel it's needed. Once that's done, if necessary, I usually do it anyway because I think it's good practice. I make a high poly. This is for this kind of mesh with marble. I found that they don't really tend to engrave too much or sculpt too much. It tends to be quite a nice clean sheets of marble from all the reference images I looked at. I did initially do some height changes in Substance Painter with a height layer and bake them into the normal to like sculpt details in and crests and all these kind of fancy stuff. But none of the references images I found actually did that stuff. It was all just if they wanted detail and patterns in their marble, in palaces and wherever, they tended to just do it with different colors of marble, different slices of marble, and it all fit into a nice, very clean, smooth floor or wall or however they laid it out. So I decided not to sculpt in high poly geometry. So this high poly is just to tidy up some of the edges and make them a bit smoother. When I export them, I have the naming convention of underscoring the high and low, and at the front I prefix it with the level itself. So chess in this case, because it's quite an easy identifier. And then I export them together and pull them into a Substance Painter file project and work on the materials I need for the scene. So for this scene, I know it's going to be marble. So there's a mixture of marble and plaster, mainly because I wanted to show this kind of wacky portal dimension where it's kind of half interior, half exterior. So for this, I realized I only needed a couple of marble materials, and I could use a few and some color variants to achieve the result I was looking for. So I messed around with a few color palettes, and this was a palette I ended up settling with because it kind of gives it like a regal look. It looks quite complementary with chess standard colors as well, and there's nothing that's particularly high in saturation. I like colors that are very muted. So I want to save saturation for spells. Spells should be the big eye-catching thing. You want to see them very clearly. So using lower saturation and more muted colors is what I tend to do. With this, I was trying to go somewhere in between. But again, this is kind of normal for me to have more muted kind of grayer colors. And so, yeah, from this, I create some smart materials, which I tend to use per project. I reuse them if I need to. And after that, these are exported as textures and brought into the Unreal scene. So I'll show you the structure a little bit. So I've got a folder for environments. I have levels and tile sets. Hub is a unique thing I'm working on at the moment, but I won't get into that. So tile sets is where I keep all the actual setup of the pieces and props and assets. The levels themselves are the actual levels that are loaded. In the tile sets, we'll go to the chest tile set. As you can see, there's the materials, which is where all the magic setup, and the meshes, which is the stuff that's exported from Blender and brought in. And so these can just be kind of dragged about and put on the scene as needed. And the textures are what are exported from Substance Painter. One last thing I want to talk about before I move on to the UE4 side of things is in Blender, I think it's a good piece of advice to consider the scaling of your scene and environment and how that plays into the rest of your project. So for forecast, we decided that one of these smaller squares, not the absolute smallest, the one up in Blender, which is a meter, is a meter in UE4 as well. So we use that as our reference point, and everything is built around that, and our grid in game is built around that. And that allows us to really easily just make stuff in Blender, throw it into UE4, and not have to mess about with size scaling settings and import and export settings on scale and changing things manually inside UE4 to make it line up. You really want to be able to scale stuff when you want to, not because you have to. So I think that's quite an important thing to keep in mind is your scaling, the size of your units, and how that relates to across the individual software you're using. So moving on from that side of things, once I had my materials set up and my meshes set up, the next kind of step is I had another round of playtesting. It's quite easy for us because we can just play quite quickly, just drop a few characters in, set them to different teams and play against yourself, and I can make sure that it follows the rough flow I want. After that, it was lighting and post-processing, and then effects. These are the things which are not my strength. So for lighting especially, I didn't use anything particularly fancy. There's a couple of things to help with visibility of the level. So I have some braziers on the side, which offer some very little amount of lighting. There are these which offer a little bit. I had some feedback, which was really helpful from a Discord server. A gentleman mentioned that my lighting was directing your gaze away from the center of the board, which is supposed to be the main focus, the hero part of the level with all my fancy designed chess caricatures. So I went back and added this kind of the fake god rays above, which is I mentioned earlier. But for the actual light sources, now you get to see loads of messy stuff everywhere. There's just lots of lights. There's a light coming out of the portals to backlight the units. There's reflection spheres, so I can capture the reflections since this is a very reflective scene, so I can move the camera so much. And then there's a bunch of lights, so one coming down from above to make sure that it lights the board up accurately, a couple of smaller ones by the lanterns. But this is something I really need to work on, so my next few scenes I'm going to make more indoor and spend some more time learning the lighting side of things. Aside from that, post-processing, mostly for me it's just changing the pitch and the color tonality of the level to make it fit the aesthetic I'm going for. The desert level was quite hot, so it was more orange tilts and tints. Changing the contrast. I don't really mess about with too much in there because I find a lot of it's a bit extreme and it's not really what you want in a game. And lastly, the effects. So I mentioned this one above before. There's the fire effect for this. I'm a pretty all-round generalist. I can make most things. I can do the animation and modeling, unwrapping materials, visual effects, and all this stuff. However, I am not unlimited my time. So some areas it's best to draw a little help. So for the effects, there are a couple of packages we've used. Namely, there's a pretty good fire one that's floating around. I think it's good because fire is notoriously really difficult to do well. So I use that package whenever I need to use fire. It's just not worth the time investment it would take me to handcraft fire and make it look great. It would just soak so much time. So when someone's done it better to a level you can't, it's fire, right? Portals are something we made a while ago and they're kind of shared across all levels, so they're not really worth mentioning. But other than that, there's the background level, which again comes from another pack. I have edited it and will probably continue to edit it. I intend to have some other props floating about in this scene and make it a bit more dimensiony. Aside from that, I decided this level was already quite busy. There's a lot of geometry detail. There's a lot of patterns and details in the level in terms of how color is used, especially in the designs on the floors. And there's a lot of reflections. So I didn't want to go too heavy with effects. So yeah, this was just a polishing phase where I play tested, made sure things worked, set up colliders on the tiles. So we have a bunch of custom colliders because we need to decide when spells collide with things, when units can parve on things, the multiple mixtures of the two. And yeah, just lots of playtesting on that front. So yeah, thanks for checking this video out. It's the first devlog. If there's interest, quite happy to make more. Let me know below if you are interested, what you are interested in. Can't guarantee it will be fantastic tutorial level knowledge, but I'll be able to show you how we're handling things. So if you're interested in how we've gone about certain things, like materials, effects, characters, spells, whatever, let me know and I'll see if I can whip up a devlog about it. Also, the developer on the project, Robert, is a really good developer and has made some very intricate systems for forecast. Unreal Engine out of the box does not really do a lot of the stuff we want for this project. Unreal is very good for third-person shooters, first-person shooters. Doesn't really have a lot to assist with strategy and tactics games. So we had to make our own camera, our own unit actors, and all kinds of stuff, movement grids. So he can do some really interesting stuff there as well. So just let us know if there's anything you want to hear about or understand how we've done, and we'll see if we can get something out there. But yeah, in summary, thanks for checking it out. I hope you like it, and I hope you're interested in Forecast. Check out our website. We have a demo that we're planning to release sometime in the next few months, where people will be able to play against each other on multiplayer PvP. We're really excited to see what happens there and to see what kind of jukey madness you guys get up to. So subscribe on our website for that. We do not send emails out currently. We are only going to send an email out with an invite for that demo. So yeah, cheers again, guys. Take care.